The phone vibrated against the hardwood floor of our bedroom closet while I was looking for my maternity sweater. At 8 months pregnant, bending down to reach anything had become an Olympic sport. But something about that unfamiliar ringtone made me pause. The screen lit up with a message preview that made my blood run cold. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Can't wait to feel our baby kick again tonight. My hand instinctively went to my swollen belly where our daughter had been doing somersaults all morning. Our baby! Except Derek was at work, and this wasn't his regular phone. This was a sleek black device I'd never seen before, tucked behind his old tennis shoes in a shoebox that supposedly contained tax documents. I stood there in our walk-in closet, my back aching, my feet swollen, holding a phone that belonged to my husband but felt like it belonged to a stranger. The message was from a contact saved simply as V.
My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to drop the phone and pretend I'd never found it. The other part, the part that had been ignoring the late nights and the distant kisses and the way Derek's hand would sometimes rest on my belly with an expression I couldn't quite read, that part needed to know. I unlocked the phone. Derek had always been terrible with passwords. He used the same 6 digits for everything, our wedding anniversary, though now that felt like a sick joke. The messages loaded and my world tilted sideways. The conversation thread went back months. Months! I scrolled upward with shaking fingers, watching my marriage unravel in blue and gray text bubbles. Derek and this V person had been talking since February. I was 8 months pregnant now. That meant this had been going on since I was barely showing, since we'd just found out we were having a girl. Since Derek had held me in the kitchen and promised that this baby would be the start of our perfect little family. Vanessa felt the baby move today, Derek had written in April. It's incredible. Different than I expected. Different than he expected. Different than what? Different than when I called him into our living room that same month to feel our daughter's first flutter of movement? I remembered that moment so clearly. I'd been folding laundry, and suddenly, there it was, that butterfly sensation everyone talks about. I'd grabbed my phone to call Derek home from his Saturday golf game, and he'd rushed through the door with such excitement. He'd pressed his hand to my stomach and waited, and when he felt that tiny nudge, his eyes had filled with tears. Had those been real tears? Or was he comparing it to something else? Someone else? I kept scrolling. The messages painted a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't look away from. Vanessa Clark. That was her full name. She lived in Lake Oswego, about 30 minutes away. She was a pharmaceutical rep, just like Derek. They'd met at a conference in Seattle last January, right before I'd gotten pregnant. Or right before I'd told him I was pregnant. Because according to these messages, Vanessa had found out she was expecting in early March. My mind raced backward through the calendar. March. I'd been about 10 weeks along, which meant Vanessa would be about 6 months pregnant now. 6 months! Carrying Derek's child while I carried Derek's child, and neither of us had known about the other until this moment, when I stood in my closet, my ankle swollen, my back screaming, reading about how my husband had created 2 families in parallel universes that were about to collide. The ultrasound is tomorrow, Vanessa had written 3 days ago. Are you still coming? Wouldn't miss it, Derek had replied. Tell our son I'll be there. Our son. They were having a boy. Derek and Vanessa were having a boy, while Derek and I were having a girl. And somewhere in his twisted mind, he'd managed to compartmentalize this so thoroughly that he could hold my hand during my ultrasounds and then drive across town to hold hers during her ultrasounds and somehow convince himself this was sustainable. The nausea hit me hard. I barely made it to the bathroom before I was sick, my pregnant belly pressed against the cold tile floor, dry heaving because there was nothing left in my stomach to come up. When the wave passed, I sat back against the bathtub, the hidden phone still clutched in my hand. How long had Derek planned to keep this going? What was his endgame? Did he think he could just maintain 2 separate lives forever, shuttling between 2 homes, 2 partners, 2 children? Or had he planned to choose eventually, to pick one family and abandon the other? The bathroom door was open, and from where I sat, I could see into the nursery across the hall. We'd painted it a soft lavender last month. Derek had spent an entire weekend assembling the crib, the changing table, the rocking chair. He'd hung the mobile himself, those delicate fabric butterflies that spun slowly in the breeze from the window. We'd argued about the curtains. I'd wanted blackout shades, and he insisted on the sheer white ones that let in the morning light. Our daughter should wake up to sunshine, he'd said, kissing my forehead while his hand rested on my belly. Our daughter. Not our baby. Our daughter. Because somewhere in his mind, he'd already started separating them. His daughter with me, his son with Vanessa. Two separate children, two separate lives, never meant to intersect. I pulled myself up using the edge of the sink, my legs shaky. In the mirror, I looked like a ghost. My face was pale, my eyes red, my hair pulled back in a messy knot. The pregnancy had been difficult. Gestational diabetes that required constant monitoring and blood sugar checks, elevated blood pressure that had my doctor talking about early induction if it didn't stabilize, and through it all, Derek had been attentive, present, concerned. Or had he been comparing? When Vanessa's blood pressure was fine, did he resent having to worry about mine? When her pregnancy progressed smoothly, did he see mine as a burden? I walked back to the closet and picked up the shoebox where the hidden phone had been hidden. Underneath it were other things. A receipt from a jewelry store in Lake Oswego dated 2 months ago. I'd never received jewelry from Derek in 2 months. A printed copy of an ultrasound image labeled Baby Clark, 20 weeks. Not Baby Harris. Baby Clark. Vanessa was keeping her own name, apparently. Or maybe Derek had never planned to marry her. Maybe he'd planned to keep her as some kind of permanent mistress, a second family he visited when he claimed to be on business trips. There were more receipts. Dinner reservations at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel rooms in Seattle. Flowers delivered to an address in Lake Oswego. Each piece of paper was another brick in the wall of Derek's double life, and I'd been completely oblivious to all of it. The sound of the garage door opening sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. Derek was home early. It was only 3 in the afternoon. He wasn't supposed to be back until 6. I shoved everything back into the shoebox and pushed it into the corner of the closet. The hidden phone went into my maternity jeans pocket, pressing against my belly. I grabbed the sweater I'd originally been looking for and pulled it on with shaking hands, then walked out of the bedroom as casually as I could manage. Derek was in the kitchen, setting his briefcase on the counter. He smiled when he saw me, that familiar, warm smile that had made me fall in love with him 7 years ago, that had convinced me he was the person I wanted to build a life with. "Hey, beautiful," he said, crossing the room to kiss my cheek. His hand automatically went to my belly and our daughter kicked against his palm. "How's my girl?" "Which girl?" I wanted to scream. "Which one? Me or her? Your daughter or your son? Which family are you talking to right now?" Instead, I forced a smile. "We're good. You're home early." "Slow day. Thought I'd surprise you. Maybe we could catch an early dinner. That Italian place you've been craving." The Italian place. Giuliana's, downtown. Except, according to the receipt in that shoebox, Derek had been to Giuliana's 2 weeks ago. With Vanessa. They'd ordered the veal saltimbocca and the lobster risotto. The bill had been $160. "Sure," I heard myself say. "That sounds nice." Derek's phone, his real phone, the one I knew about, buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression flickered. Just for a second, but I caught it. Tension around his eyes, a tightness in his jaw. "Work thing," he said, typing a quick response. "Give me 5 minutes to handle this, then we'll go." He disappeared into his home office, closing the door behind him. The moment he was gone, I pulled out the hidden phone. A new message from V had just come through. "Derek, where are you? We had an appointment at 3. Dr. Morrison's office called, asking if we were still coming." My hand trembled as I read it. An appointment at 3. The same time he'd come home early to surprise me with dinner. He'd missed Vanessa's appointment, and now she was upset, and he's in his office, probably trying to smooth things over, and I'm standing in my kitchen with a belly full of his child, discovering that I'd been sharing my husband with another woman who was also carrying his child. The office door opened.
Derek emerged, tucking his phone into his pocket, his expression carefully neutral. Ready to go? I wasn't ready. I would never be ready. But I nodded anyway, grabbed my purse, and followed him to the car, the hidden phone burning a hole in my pocket with every step. At Juliana's, we sat at a corner booth. Derek ordered for both of us, the way he always did. Antipasto to start, then the butternut squash ravioli for me because it was safe for the gestational diabetes, and the also buco for him. He ordered sparkling water without me asking. Remember that I couldn't have the wine I used to love. He was being the perfect husband, attentive, considerate, present. And all I could think about was whether he'd sat in this same restaurant 2 weeks ago, in this same booth maybe, being equally attentive to Vanessa. Did he order for her too? Did he remember what she could and couldn't eat?
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Did he hold her hand across the table the way he was holding mine right now? You're quiet, Derek said, his thumb stroking circles on the back of my hand. Everything okay? How did you answer a question like that? How did you sit across from someone you'd built a life with and pretend everything was normal when you just discovered they'd been building a second life behind your back? Just tired, I said. It wasn't a lie. I was tired, exhausted, but not from the pregnancy, from holding up a smile, from pretending, from trying to figure out what to do with the information burning through my brain. Only a few more weeks, Derek said softly. Then our little girl will be here, and this will all be worth it. Our little girl? I watched his face as he said it, searching for any hint of deception, any tell that he was thinking about the other baby, the son he was expecting with Vanessa in just a few months. But Derek's expression was open, genuine, filled with the kind of anticipation that should have made me feel secure and loved. Instead, it made me feel sick. The food arrived, and I pushed ravioli around my plate, taking small bites that tasted like cardboard. Derek ate with enthusiasm, talking about work, about the nursery, about baby names we'd narrowed down but hadn't quite decided on. What about Claire, he suggested. Claire Elizabeth Harris. That has a nice ring to it. Claire Elizabeth. I wondered if he and Vanessa had picked out a name yet, if he'd suggested names to her with the same enthusiasm, the same careful consideration of how it would sound with the Harris last name. Or was the baby going to be a Clark? Another way to keep the two families separate in his mind. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, grateful for the distraction, and saw a text from Helen, my older sister. Haven't heard from you in a few days. Everything good with you and Peanut? Peanut! That's what Helen had been calling the baby since we found out I was pregnant. She'd been so excited to become an aunt, had already bought enough baby clothes to outfit triplets. She was planning to fly in from Denver a week before my due date to help with the transition home from the hospital. I stared at her message, and suddenly, more than anything, I wanted to call her. I wanted to tell her everything, to hear her logical, steady voice tell me what to do. Helen was a lawyer. She'd dealt with difficult situations for a living. She'd know how to handle this. But we were in a restaurant, and Derek was watching me with concern, and I couldn't fall apart here, surrounded by other couples having normal dinners, living normal lives, where their husbands weren't maintaining secret second families. Helen checking in? Derek asked. I nodded, typing a quick response. All good, talk tomorrow. I didn't tell her the truth. Not yet. Because once I told someone, once I said the words out loud, this nightmare would become real in a way I wasn't ready to face. We finished dinner in a haze of small talk that felt like walking through fog. Derek paid the bill, leaving a generous tip for the server who'd been attentive despite my barely touched meal. We drove home in comfortable silence, his hand resting on my thigh the way it always did, and I felt like I was watching my life from outside my body, seeing us as we appeared to the world, a happy couple expecting their first child, building a future together. Except the future I thought we were building was based on a foundation of lies so extensive, I didn't even know where the truth ended and the deception began. Back home, Derek suggested we watch a movie. He scrolled through our streaming options while I settled onto the couch with pillows propped around me for back support. He chose a comedy, something light and mindless, and pulled my feet into his lap to massage them the way he'd been doing throughout the pregnancy. His hands worked the sore muscles of my feet and ankles, and I closed my eyes, trying to reconcile the man sitting here taking care of me with the man whose secret phone held months of messages to another woman carrying his child. Halfway through the movie, Derek's real phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and I saw the same flicker of tension from earlier. "I need to take this," he said, moving my feet gently. "Work emergency." He stepped out onto the back patio, and I watched through the glass door as he paced, one hand running through his hair in the gesture I knew meant he was stressed. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see his body language. Defensive, apologetic, trying to smooth over whatever crisis he had created by missing Vanessa's appointment. I pulled the hidden phone from where I'd stashed it in the couch cushions. Another message from V had come through. "I can't keep doing this, Derek. I need to know you're committed to us, to our son. I'm 6 months pregnant and I feel like I'm doing this alone." Alone. Vanessa felt alone in her pregnancy while Derek's real wife sat on his couch with swollen feet and his child kicking against her ribs. The irony was so sharp it could cut. Derek came back inside, his expression carefully composed. "Sorry about that. Client issue. All sorted now." He settled back onto the couch and pulled me close, his hand resting on my belly, where our daughter was shifting and turning, running out of room in my overcrowded womb. "I love you," he whispered into my hair. "You know that, right? You and this baby, you're everything to me." I wanted to believe him. Part of me, the part that still remembered who we used to be, still wanted to think this was all some terrible misunderstanding, that there was an explanation that would make sense of the hidden phone and the messages and the receipts and the second baby. But I'd seen the evidence, I'd read the words, and deep down, in the part of me that had been ignoring the warning signs for months, I knew the truth. Derek had built 2 lives. 2 families. And I'd been too trusting, too naive, too focused on the pregnancy and the nursery and the future I thought we were building together to see what was happening right in front of me. That night, I lay awake next to my husband, listening to him breathe deeply in sleep, feeling our daughter's movements inside me, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him yet. Not until I knew more. Not until I understood the full scope of what I was dealing with. I needed information. I needed a plan. And most of all, I needed to protect myself and my daughter from whatever storm was about to break over our lives. At 2 a.m, unable to sleep, I crept downstairs to the kitchen.
The hidden phone was in my robe pocket. I sat at the table in the dark and opened the message thread with Vanessa, scrolling through months of conversations, reading the story of Derek's other life. They'd met at a pharmaceutical conference in Seattle in January, both working for competing companies, both at the hotel bar after a long day of presentations. One drink had led to another, and then to a night that Derek had apparently never mentioned to me. I'd been home that weekend, dealing with a terrible flu that had knocked me flat. Derek had called me from the conference, commiserating about how boring the sessions were, how much he wished he was home with me instead. He'd never mentioned meeting anyone, never mentioned the woman who would become his mistress, who would end up pregnant with his child just weeks after I conceived our daughter. The messages showed a relationship that had developed quickly. By February, they were meeting regularly. By March, Vanessa was pregnant, and Derek was there for her first ultrasound, the first time they heard the heartbeat, the first time they saw their son's tiny form on the screen. He'd done everything with her that he'd done with me. Every milestone, every appointment, every moment that should have been special and unique, he duplicated. We were living parallel pregnancies, and he was the only one who knew. In April, Vanessa had written, "When are you going to tell Lauren? We can't keep hiding this forever." Derek's response, "I need more time. It's complicated. She's pregnant too, and the timing is just really difficult." "You're having a baby with your wife and a baby with me," Vanessa had written back. "When exactly is the timing going to be better?" That conversation had gone in circles, Derek promising to figure things out, Vanessa growing increasingly frustrated. By May, she was demanding answers, wanting to know what his plans were, where she fit in his life, whether he was planning to leave me or stay in his marriage. Derek's answers had been vague. He loved Vanessa, he wanted to be there for their son, but he couldn't just walk away from his marriage, especially not with a baby on the way. He needed time to figure out how to handle everything, how to make sure no one got hurt. No one got hurt. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Too late for that. A sound from upstairs made me freeze. Footsteps. Derek was awake. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and pretended to be getting water from the fridge. "Lauren?" His voice from the stairs, groggy with sleep. "What are you up?" "Baby's kicking. Couldn't sleep. Just getting some water." He came down, wearing only his boxers, his hair mussed from the pillow. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his hands spanning my pregnant belly, and I felt the baby move beneath his touch. "She's active tonight. Takes after her mom." I leaned back against him, and for just a moment, I let myself pretend everything was normal. That this was just my husband, holding me in our kitchen in the middle of the night, feeling our daughter move. That there was another woman across town 6 months pregnant with his son, probably lying awake wondering where he was and when he was going to choose her. "Come back to bed," Derek said softly. "You need rest." I followed him upstairs, climbed back into our bed, and let him pull me close. His arm draped over my side, his hand resting protectively on my belly, and I closed my eyes and tried not to think about how many times he'd probably held Vanessa the exact same way. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd figure out what to do. Tomorrow I'd start making a plan. But tonight, for just these few remaining hours, I was still the woman I'd been yesterday. Still Derek's wife. Still the mother of his only child, as far as I knew. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, I let myself believe the lie a little longer. Because once I faced the truth, there would be no going back. The hidden phone vibrated silently against my hip, and I knew without looking that it was another message from Vanessa, another reminder that my marriage was built on deception so complete, I didn't even know where to begin unraveling it. Our daughter kicked hard against Derek's palm, and he smiled in his sleep, and I stared at the ceiling, counting down the hours until morning, when I would have to decide who I was going to become next. Morning came, with cruel sunlight streaming through our bedroom windows. Derek's alarm went off at 6:30, the same time it always did, and he rolled over to kiss my forehead before heading to the shower. I listened to the water run, stared at the ceiling, and tried to figure out how to get through another day of pretending. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Helen, all from late last night after I'd finally fallen asleep. She'd left a voicemail. "Lauren, I know everything is fine, but your text last night felt off. Call me when you wake up. Love you." Sisters always knew. Even across state lines, even through carefully constructed lies, Helen had sensed something was wrong. I'd have to call her back, but not yet. Not until I had a better grip on what I was dealing with. Derek emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, water still dripping from his hair. He rummaged through his dresser, pulling out a crisp white shirt and navy slacks. His movements were practiced, efficient, the routine of someone who'd done this exact same thing 1,000 times before. Big day today. Meeting with the regional director. Might be home late. Or might be going to see Vanessa. I watched him adjust his tie in the mirror, wondering how many of his late nights had actually been work meetings and how many had been spent in Lake Oswell, building his other life. "What time should I expect you?" I kept my voice casual, just a wife checking in on her husband's schedule. "Probably around 8. Don't wait on dinner for me." He leaned down to kiss me goodbye, his hand resting briefly on my belly. Our daughter was still sleeping, the early morning stillness before her usual acrobatic routine began. He smiled at the gentle swell beneath his palm, and I wondered if he was thinking about the other baby, the son who would arrive in about 3 months, just weeks after our daughter was born. How did he plan to handle that? 2 newborns, 2 mothers expecting his presence,
his support, his sleepless nights of diaper changes and feedings. Had he thought that far ahead? Or was he just living day to day, dealing with each crisis as it arose? The garage door closed behind him, and I was alone. I pulled the hidden phone from my nightstand where I'd stashed it after he fell asleep. 3 new messages from Vanessa, all sent between midnight and 2 in the morning. Derek, we need to talk about what happened today. You can't miss appointments. I'm scared. The doctor said my blood pressure is elevated. I need you here. Please call me when you wake up. I'm sorry for getting upset. I just feel so alone in this. Elevated blood pressure. The same complication I was dealing with. I wondered if Derek had mentioned that to Vanessa, if he'd compared our symptoms, if he'd felt the weight of managing 2 high-risk pregnancies simultaneously. I scrolled further back through their messages, looking for patterns, for clues about how deep this went. In June, they discussed baby names. Vanessa wanted to name their son after Derek's father, Thomas. Derek hedged, said he needed to think about it. I knew why. Thomas was also the middle name we'd chosen for our daughter, Claire Thomas Harris. Using his father's name twice would be too obvious, too risky. In July, there were messages about preparing the nursery. Vanessa had sent photos of paint swatches asking Derek's opinion. He'd chosen a soft blue-gray, the same shade we'd originally considered for our nursery before deciding on lavender. Was he trying to create 2 identical spaces, or had he just run out of creative energy for decorating decisions? August brought more complications. Vanessa's messages became more desperate, more demanding.
She wanted clarity about their future. She wanted to know if Derek was planning to leave me, if he was going to be there for their son's birth, if she should list him on the birth certificate or protect herself by keeping him off it. Derek's responses were maddeningly vague. He loved her, he promised. He wanted to be there for their son. But the situation was complex. His wife was pregnant too, high risk, dealing with complications. He couldn't just abandon her in her 3rd trimester. Surely Vanessa understood that? The manipulation was breathtaking. He was using my pregnancy as an excuse to keep Vanessa waiting, while simultaneously using Vanessa's pregnancy as justification for his late nights and distracted behavior at home. He'd created a perfect loop where each woman's condition gave him cover with the other. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with before I made any decisions. Confronting Derek now, while I was this pregnant, this vulnerable, this dependent on him, felt dangerous. I needed a plan first. I needed leverage. The house phone rang, startling me. I checked the caller ID. Portland General Hospital. My doctor's office. Mrs. Harris, this is Diane from Dr. Patel's office. We need to reschedule your appointment from Thursday to this afternoon, if possible. The doctor wants to check your blood pressure again, and we had a cancellation. This afternoon, I agreed. Wrote down the time, hung up. Then I stared at the hidden phone in my hand and made a decision that would change everything. I opened Vanessa's contact information and found her address. 2847 Lakeview Terrace, Lake Oswego. A quick search showed it was a townhouse complex, relatively upscale, about 25 minutes from our house in Beaverton. What would happen if I just showed up, knocked on her door, introduced myself as Derek's wife, the one carrying his other child? The idea was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Part of me wanted to see her face when she realized. Part of me wanted to watch her world crumble the way mine had crumbled yesterday in our closet. But I was 8 months pregnant. A confrontation like that could send my blood pressure skyrocketing, could put the baby at risk. I needed to be smarter than that. Instead, I did something that surprised me. I created a fake email address, used a generic name, set up a temporary account that couldn't be traced back to me. Then I drafted a message to Vanessa. You don't know me, but I know about you and Derek Harris. I think we should talk. There are things you need to know about the man you're having a baby with. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I did this, there was no taking it back. Once Vanessa knew that someone else knew about their affair, the secret would start to unravel. I pressed send. The rest of the morning passed in a strange fog. I did normal things. Made breakfast, though I couldn't eat it.
Sorted laundry, responded to Helen's voicemail with a text promising to call her later, tried to read a book, and found myself staring at the same page for 20 minutes without absorbing a single word. At 1 o'clock, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Vanessa had responded. "Who is this? How do you know about Derek and me?" I typed back quickly. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you're about to have a baby with a man who's been lying to you about fundamental things. Are you willing to meet in person, somewhere public?" The response came within minutes. "Tomorrow. There's a coffee shop on Boone's Ferry Road, Java House, 2 o'clock. I agreed, gave her a description of what I'd be wearing so she could find me, then closed the email. My hands were shaking. What was I doing? Was I really going to sit across from my husband's pregnant mistress and tell her that she was the other woman? That I was the wife? That Derek had been playing both of us? But Vanessa didn't know she was the other woman. In her mind, I was probably the obstacle, the wife Derek was planning to leave, the complications standing between her and her happy ending with the father of her child. She had no idea that Derek had never planned to leave me, that he'd been stringing her along while maintaining our marriage, that she was just as much a victim of his lies as I was. My doctor's appointment was at 3. I drove to the hospital feeling disconnected from my body, like I was watching myself go through the motions from somewhere far away. The nurse took my blood pressure 3 times because the first 2 readings were so high. "Lauren, we need to talk about this," Dr. Patel said, reviewing my chart with a concerned expression. "Your blood pressure has been climbing steadily. Combined with the gestational diabetes, I'm getting worried. We may need to consider early induction." "How early?" My voice sounded hollow. "If it doesn't stabilize in the next week or 2, we'll probably induce at 38 weeks. Better to deliver a little early than risk preeclampsia." 38 weeks? That was less than 2 weeks away. 2 weeks until our daughter arrived, until I became a mother, until everything about my life changed permanently. 2 weeks to figure out what I was going to do about Derek. "I need you to reduce stress as much as possible," Dr. Patel continued. "Rest, stay off your feet, avoid anything that might spike your blood pressure. Is everything okay at home?" The question hung in the air between us. I could tell her. I could say that I'd just discovered my husband was having a baby with another woman, that my entire marriage was a lie, that the stress of keeping this secret was probably what was making my blood pressure skyrocket. But what good would that do? Dr. Patel was an obstetrician, not a marriage counselor. She couldn't fix Derek's betrayal. She could only treat the medical symptoms of my emotional catastrophe. "Everything's fine," I lied. "Just normal pregnancy stress." Driving home, I took a detour past Lakeview Terrace. I told myself I was just curious, just wanted to see where Vanessa lived, but I knew it was more than that. I needed to make this real, to see physical evidence of Derek's other life. The townhouse complex was nice, well-maintained grounds, modern architecture, the kind of place that probably cost twice what our mortgage did. Unit 2847 had a small patio with potted plants and a wreath on the door. Through the window, I could see inside, a living room with tasteful furniture, and there, visible from the street, a bassinet set up near the window. Vanessa was preparing for her baby, setting up a nursery, buying supplies, nesting in all the ways I'd been nesting. She probably spent evenings folding tiny clothes and organizing diapers, imagining the moment she'd bring her son home, dreaming about the family she thought she was building. A woman emerged from the townhouse carrying a bag of trash to the dumpster. She was clearly pregnant, maybe 6 months along, just like the messages had said. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater. She moved with the careful waddle of someone whose center of gravity had shifted, whose body no longer quite belonged to her alone. Vanessa. This was the woman Derek had chosen to betray me with. This was the woman carrying my husband's son. She wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined someone younger, more glamorous, the kind of woman who looked like a homewrecker from a movie. But Vanessa looked normal, tired, pregnant and overwhelmed, just like me.
Our eyes met across the parking lot for just a second before I looked away, heart pounding. Did she recognize me? Had Derek shown her pictures? But no, she just tossed her trash and headed back inside, hand supporting her lower back in a gesture I knew intimately. I drove away before she could notice me sitting there, a pregnant woman watching another pregnant woman, both of us connected by the same man who'd lied to both of us. That evening, Derek came home exactly at 8, just like he had said. He brought Chinese takeout, my favorite from the place on Cornell Road, sweet and sour chicken that I could eat with my diabetes, extra egg rolls because he knew I'd been craving them. "How was your day?" he asked, spreading the containers across our kitchen table.
Doctor's appointment. Blood pressure still high? His expression shifted to immediate concern. What did Dr. Patel say? Is the baby okay? She's fine, but we might need to induce early if my pressure doesn't come down. Derek's hand found mine across the table. Whatever you need, I'm here. We'll get through this together. Together. The word felt like a knife. We weren't together. We'd never been together, not really. He'd been divided between two lives, two women, two babies, and I'd been too naive to see it. How was your meeting? I asked, taking a bite of chicken I didn't want. Good, really good, actually. Regional director was impressed with my sales numbers. Might be a promotion in the works. He talked about his day with enthusiasm, sharing details about presentations and clients' accounts and office politics. He was a good storyteller. Animated, engaging, funny. This was the Derek I'd fallen in love with. The man who could make the most mundane workday sound like an adventure. Was any of it true? Or was this just another performance, another layer of the elaborate fiction he'd constructed? After dinner, we settled on the couch to watch television. Derek pulled my feet into his lap again, continuing the nightly massage ritual that had become our routine. His hands worked the swollen muscles with practiced ease, and I felt the baby shift and roll inside me, responding to the reduction in my stress. Have you thought more about names? Derek asked during a commercial break. We still haven't decided for sure. I like Claire, I said. Claire Thomas Harris. He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but I caught it, the flicker of discomfort at hearing his father's name attached to our daughter. What about Claire Elizabeth instead? He suggested. Elizabeth was your grandmother's name, right? He wanted to save Thomas for his son, for the baby he was having with Vanessa. He couldn't use his father's name twice, so he was trying to steer me away from it. I really like Thomas, I insisted, watching his face. Your dad would be so honored. Yeah, you're right. Claire Thomas is beautiful. But I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes, the calculations about how he'd explained to Vanessa that their son couldn't be named after his father after all, that the name was already taken by his other child. That night, I lay awake again, listening to Derek sleep beside me. The hidden phone was under my pillow, vibrating occasionally with new messages from Vanessa that I didn't bother reading. Tomorrow I'd meet her. Tomorrow I'd tell her the truth and watch her realize that her relationship with Derek was built on the same lies mine was. But tonight, I allowed myself one last moment of pretending. I placed Derek's hand on my belly where our daughter was kicking, and I imagined an alternate reality where he was actually the man I'd thought he was, where our marriage was real, our baby was wanted and planned for, our future was secure. In that alternate reality, Derek woke up to feel the baby move. He pressed his lips to my shoulder and whispered that he loved us, that we were his whole world, that nothing would ever come between our family. But this wasn't that reality. This was the real world, where Derek had created two families and thought he could maintain both indefinitely, where his love was divided, his attention fractured, his promises hollow. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Vanessa would learn the truth, and the careful house of cards Derek had built would start to collapse. But tonight, for these last few hours before I detonated his carefully constructed lies, I let myself grieve for the marriage I'd thought I had, the family I'd thought we were building, the future I had imagined for our daughter. Tomorrow, I'd become someone different, someone harder, someone who fought back,
Someone who refused to be one more woman Derek Harris manipulated and betrayed. But tonight, I was still just Lauren, 8 months pregnant, lying next to the man who'd promised to love me forever, trying to memorize the feeling of that promise before I learned exactly how little it had ever meant. The clock on the nightstand glowed green in the darkness. 2:17 in the morning. In less than 12 hours, I'd be sitting across from Vanessa at Java House, and both of our lives would shatter in ways Derek had never anticipated. I pressed my hand against my belly, feeling our daughter's movements beneath my palm. She deserved better than this. Better than a father who saw children as possessions to collect, who treated women as interchangeable, who built elaborate lies and called it love. Whatever happened next, I'd make sure she knew her worth. I'd raise her to spot the red flags I'd missed, to value herself more than I'd valued myself, to never accept half-truths and divided loyalties from anyone. Derek's phone buzzed on his nightstand. He'd forgotten to silence it. I watched him reach for it in his sleep, check the screen, then place it back without fully waking. But I'd seen the notification. Another message from V. Another demand for his time, his attention, his commitment. She'd find out tomorrow that she wasn't the only one making demands, that the man she loved was already promised to someone else, that her son would have a half-sister born just weeks before him, a sister whose mother had been just as deceived as she was. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, knowing it wouldn't come. The baby kicked against my ribs, and I wondered if she could sense the tension in my body, the adrenaline keeping me awake, the anxiety of what tomorrow would bring. In 2 weeks, maybe less, she'd be here, born into a family that was already broken before she took her first breath. But I'd protect her. Whatever it took, however hard it got, I'd make sure she was okay. Even if that meant burning down everything Derek had built and forcing him to face the consequences of treating people like chess pieces in a game only he knew he was playing. Java House occupied a corner spot on Boone's Ferry Road, all exposed brick and industrial lighting, the kind of trendy place that served $15 lattes to people working remotely on MacBooks. I arrived 20 minutes early, found a table in the back corner where I could watch the door, and ordered decaf coffee I had no intention of drinking. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept checking my phone, half expecting Derek to somehow know what I was doing, to call and demand an explanation. But there was nothing. Just a text from him an hour ago saying he'd be in back-to-back meetings all afternoon and might not respond right away. Perfect timing. He had no idea his two worlds were about to collide. At exactly 2 o'clock, Vanessa walked through the door. She paused at the entrance, scanning the room, one hand protectively cradling her belly. She wore a burgundy maternity dress, leather jacket, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She looked nervous, uncertain, nothing like the confident other woman I'd built up in my head. I raised my hand slightly, and her eyes found mine. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the coffee shop. 2 pregnant women, both carrying Derek Harris's children, both about to have a conversation that would destroy the carefully constructed reality he'd built for each of us. Vanessa approached slowly, lowering herself into the chair across from me with the same careful movements I recognized from my own struggle with furniture and balance. Her eyes traveled from my face down to my very obviously pregnant belly, and I watched comprehension dawn in stages. "You're pregnant," she said. Her voice was softer than I expected, with a slight tremor. 8 months, due in 2 weeks, give or take. She placed both hands on her own belly, protective, defensive. "I don't understand. Who are you?" "Lauren Harris." I let the name hang in the air between us. "Derek's wife." The color drained from her face. "That's not possible. Derek said he was separated. He said the divorce was already in progress, that it was just a matter of paperwork." "Of course he did." I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes when the worst thing you imagined turns out to be exactly as bad as you feared. "We're not separated. We're not getting divorced. We live together in Beaverton. He came home last night around 8, we had Chinese food for dinner, and he fell asleep next to me like he does every night.
Vanessa's breathing had become shallow, rapid. No, he wouldn't lie about something like that. We're having a baby together. He's been to my ultrasounds. He's helped me set up the nursery. He talks about our future as a family. What color did he pick for the nursery? I asked quietly. Blue-gray. Why does that matter? Because that's the same color we almost used for our nursery before we decided on lavender. Tell me, Vanessa, did Derek suggest naming your son Thomas? Her silence was answer enough. Thomas is my daughter's middle name, I continued. Claire Thomas Harris. We chose it weeks ago, Derek's father's name. Which is why he had to talk you out of it, isn't it? Because he couldn't explain to me why his father's name was already being used for another grandchild. Vanessa's hand went to her mouth. I think I'm going to be sick. The bathroom's in the back. Take your time. She fled, moving as fast as her pregnant body would allow. I sat alone at the table, sipping coffee that had gone cold, watching other people live their normal lives. A couple at the counter debating between muffin flavors. A woman on her laptop, completely absorbed in whatever she was working on. A group of teenagers laughing over shared phones. None of them knew that two women's lives were imploding in the corner booth. None of them could see the wreckage spreading out from Derek's lies. When Vanessa returned, her face was splotchy, her eyes red. She'd been crying. She sat down slowly, and I saw her hands were trembling. How long have you known? She asked. 2 days. I found his second phone in our closet. Read all your messages. 2 days! She laughed, a harsh sound. I've been wondering for 6 months when he was going to tell you about me, and you've known for 2 days? He wasn't going to tell me. He was planning to maintain both relationships indefinitely. 2 babies, 2 homes, 2 lives. He actually thought he could pull it off. Vanessa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Tell me everything. I need to know what's real and what's been a lie. So I did. I told her about our 7-year marriage, about Derek's proposal on a beach in Cannon Beach, about how we'd been trying to get pregnant for almost a year before it finally happened. I told her about the nursery we decorated together, the baby shower my sister was planning, the names we debated over late-night conversations. And she told me her side, meeting Derek at the Seattle conference in January, believing him when he said his marriage was over, that he was just waiting for the right time to file papers. The way he'd courted her with attention and gifts made her feel special, chosen. How excited he'd been when she told him she was pregnant. How he'd promised to be there for everything to build a life with her and their son. He told me you didn't want children, Vanessa said, her voice breaking. He said that was one of the reasons the marriage fell apart, that you were focused on your career and he wanted a family. I'm a freelance graphic designer. I work from home specifically so I could be available when we had kids. It's all we've talked about for years. She closed her eyes. What else did he lie about? Probably everything. I've been going through the phone for 2 days, reading months of messages. The level of deception is staggering. He's been living 2 completely separate lives, telling each of us whatever we needed to hear to keep us both invested. I loved him. Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. I really loved him. I turned down a job transfer to San Francisco because he said we should stay in Portland to raise our son here. I told my parents about him, about the baby. They're flying in next month for the birth. My sister's flying in too, from Denver. She's planning to stay for 2 weeks to help with the baby. We sat in silence for a moment. 2 women who should have been enemies, but were really just fellow victims of the same man's elaborate con. What are you going to do? Vanessa finally asked. I don't know yet. Confront him, obviously, but I'm 8 months pregnant with complications. My blood pressure is through the roof. My doctor wants to induce early. I can't afford to have a complete breakdown right now. I'm 6 months. Healthy pregnancy, no complications, but my job is on the line. I've been taking so much time off for appointments, and Derek promised he'd be there for all of them, that I could count on him. My boss is getting frustrated with my absences. He missed your appointment on Tuesday. She looked up sharply. How did you know that? Because he came home early and took me to dinner. Told me he had a slow day at work. The whole time, you were sitting at your doctor's office alone, sending him frantic messages.
Vanessa's jaw tightened. I want to kill him. Get in line. A waiter approached to refill my coffee, and we both fell silent until he left. When he was gone, Vanessa leaned forward. We need to do something. We can't just let him get away with this. What do you suggest? He hasn't done anything illegal. Being a terrible person isn't a crime. But there has to be something, some way to make him face consequences. I thought about Derek's job, his reputation, his carefully constructed image as a devoted husband and father-to-be. What would happen if his coworkers knew? If his boss found out he'd been lying about family emergencies and doctor's appointments to juggle 2 pregnant women? His company has a morality clause. I remember him mentioning it when we reviewed his employment contract. Something about conduct unbecoming a representative of the company. Vanessa sat up straighter. I work in the same industry. If this got out, if other reps heard about it, his reputation would be destroyed. No one wants to do business with someone who can't be trusted in their personal life. That feels too abstract, too slow. I want him to feel what we're feeling right now. The shock, the betrayal, the realization that everything you believed was a lie. Then we tell him. Together, both of us at the same time, make him face what he's done. The idea had merit. Derek's whole strategy relied on keeping us separate, feeding us different stories, making sure we never compared notes. What would happen if we confronted him jointly, presented a united front? When? I asked. Now, today. Why give him more time to prepare excuses? He's at work. He said he'd be in meetings all afternoon. Vanessa pulled out her phone, checked something, then showed me the screen. It was a shared calendar app. He told me he uses this to keep track of both our schedules. See, today it shows he's home by 4, no meetings scheduled after 3. Another lie. He told me he'd be home late, probably so he could spend the evening with Vanessa. My house. Our house. He needs to see that his real life, his actual family, that's what he's destroying. Can you be there by 5? I'll be there. I wrote down my address, watched Vanessa save it in her phone, and for a moment, we were just 2 women coordinating schedules like friends planning coffee. Except we were planning the systematic destruction of a man who'd betrayed us both. Lauren, Vanessa said as we stood to leave, I'm sorry for all of this. I genuinely thought he was separated. I would never have pursued anything with a married man if I'd known. I believe you. Derek's very good at lying. Not good enough, apparently. He should have been more careful about hiding that phone. We walked out of Java House together, 2 pregnant women who'd entered as strangers and left as unlikely allies. People who saw us probably assumed we were friends, maybe coworkers, just 2 expecting mothers grabbing coffee. They had no idea we were both carrying the same man's children, or that we were about to detonate his entire life. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with everything that had just happened. Vanessa seemed genuine, seemed as shocked and hurt as I was. But could I trust her? What if she warned Derek, gave him time to prepare a defense? What if this was all some elaborate setup? But no, I'd seen her face when she realized I was Derek's wife. That kind of shock couldn't be faked. She'd believed his lies just as completely as I had. At home, I moved through the house like a ghost, straightening things that didn't need straightening, preparing for a confrontation I couldn't quite imagine. What would I say? How would I keep my composure when all I wanted to do was scream? The nursery door was open, and I found myself standing in the doorway, looking at everything we'd prepared. The crib with its lavender bedding, the changing table stocked with diapers and wipes, the rocking chair where I'd imagined feeding our daughter in the quiet hours of early morning. Had Derek stood in Vanessa's nursery too, looking at the blue-gray walls, imagining feeding his son? Did he picture himself shuttling between 2 homes, 2 families, somehow maintaining both without either of us ever finding out? The arrogance of it was breathtaking. The sheer audacity to think he could pull off something like this.
to believe we'd never discover the truth. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Meeting's wrapping up early, home by 4:30. Want me to pick up dinner? I texted back. No need. I'm making something special. Special. That was one word for it. At 4:15, I heard a car pull up outside. I looked through the window and saw Vanessa getting out of a silver Honda, checking the address I'd given her, steadying herself before walking up the driveway. I opened the door before she could knock. He'll be here in 15 minutes, I said. I'm ready. We sat in the living room, two pregnant women waiting for the man who'd betrayed us both. The silence was heavy, loaded with everything we weren't saying. I kept glancing at Vanessa, trying to understand how Derek had managed to keep both relationships going for so long. What had he seen in each of us? What needs were we filling that required him to maintain both? Can I ask you something? Vanessa's voice was quiet. Did you love him? Do you still? I thought about the question. I loved who I thought he was. The man who brought me coffee in bed and planned surprise weekend trips. The man who talked about our daughter like she was already the center of his universe. But that man doesn't exist, does he? He was just a character Derek played when it was convenient. Yeah, Vanessa said softly. Yeah, I think you're right. The garage door opener whirred to life. Derek was home. We both stood up, positioned ourselves side by side in the living room, facing the door that led from the garage to the kitchen. I felt Vanessa's hand find mine, and I squeezed it. Two women united against the man who'd tried to keep us divided. The door opened. Derek walked in, loosening his tie, calling out his usual greeting. Lauren, I'm home. Sorry I'm early. The meetings got canceled, and I thought we could maybe watch that show you've been wanting to. He rounded the corner into the living room and froze. I will never forget the look on his face. The confusion that hit first, then recognition, then dawning horror as he realized what was happening. His eyes moved from me to Vanessa and back again, and I watched him try to calculate, to figure out what we knew, what we'd discussed, what damage control he needed to deploy. Lauren, he started, his voice strangled. What is Vanessa doing here? That's your opening, I said. Not an apology, not an explanation, just asking why your pregnant mistress is standing in your living room with your pregnant wife. He took a step backward, actually physically retreating from the situation. It's not what you think. It never is, Vanessa said, her voice harder than I'd heard it. That's what liars always say. Vanessa, please let me explain. Which one of us are you talking to? I asked, because we've both been hearing your explanations for months now, and we've compared notes. Your stories don't match up, Derek. He ran his hand through his hair. That gesture I knew meant he was panicking. Okay, just give me a minute to think. No, Vanessa said firmly. No more time to prepare lies. We want the truth. Right now, all of it. Derek sank onto the couch, his face in his hands. When he looked up, I saw something I'd never seen before. Derek had always been confident, assured, in control. Now he looked small, trapped, defeated. I never meant for this to happen. That's not the truth, I countered. That's an excuse. Try again. I met Vanessa at the conference. We clicked. One thing led to another, and I thought it would just be that one night. But then she got pregnant, and I couldn't just abandon her. But you could abandon me? I asked. No, that's not what I'm saying. I couldn't abandon either of you, so I tried to figure out a way to make both situations work. Both situations? Is that what we are to you? Situations to manage? You told me you were separated. You told me your marriage was over, that you were just waiting for the paperwork to finalize. Was any of that true? Derek's silence was answer enough. How were you planning to handle the births? I asked. Our daughter is due in 2 weeks. His son is due in March. Were you just gonna teleport between hospitals? Split yourself in half? I hadn't figured that part out yet. You hadn't figured it out. I felt something crack inside me.
Derek, these are babies. Real, living children who need a father, not part-time attention when you can squeeze them into your schedule. And we're real people with real feelings, not dolls you can pick up and put down when it's convenient. I know that now, he said miserably. I just got in over my head and didn't know how to get out. So you kept lying, Vanessa said. You kept making promises to both of us, kept showing up at ultrasounds and decorating nurseries, kept playing the devoted partner while maintaining a completely separate life elsewhere? Derek looked between us, and I saw the moment he realized he'd lost. Not just his marriage, not just his relationship with Vanessa, but any claim to being the victim in this situation. Get out, I said again. Pack a bag and leave. I don't care where you go, but you can't stay here tonight. Lauren, be reasonable. You're 8 months pregnant. You can't handle this alone. I'm not alone, I gestured to Vanessa, and I'd rather handle it with a stranger who's been honest with me for one afternoon than with a husband who's been lying to me for months.
Derek's face cycled through emotions too quickly to name. Anger, guilt, fear, resignation. Finally, he headed for the stairs without another word. Vanessa and I stood in the living room, listening to him move around the bedroom above us, opening drawers and closets, packing the same suitcase he'd probably taken on fake business trips to see her. "Are you okay?" Vanessa asked. "No, but I will be." When Derek came back down, suitcase in hand, he paused at the door. "Lauren, I really am sorry. I know you don't believe me, but I never wanted things to end this way." "How did you want them to end, Derek? What was your best-case scenario?" He didn't have an answer. He looked at Vanessa one more time, opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with the same quiet click as that morning I'd found the phone, when I'd still believed our marriage was salvageable. Vanessa and I stood in the sudden silence of my house. Outside, we heard Derek's car start and drive away. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," I said, feeling lighter despite everything, "we figure out how to move forward. Separately, probably, but at least with the truth. I meant what I said earlier. I want him to face consequences." I thought about Derek's carefully constructed life, his reputation, his career that relied on trust and reliability. An idea was forming, something that would hit him where it hurt most. "Give me your number," I said. "I think I know where to start." After Vanessa left, promising to stay in touch and coordinate our next moves, I stood alone in my living room feeling strangely calm. The house felt different without Derek's presence. Lighter somehow, despite everything that had just happened. My daughter kicked hard against my ribs as if responding to the shift in energy, and I placed my hand over the spot. "It's going to be okay," I whispered to her. "We're going to be okay." My phone rang. Helen's name flashed on the screen. My sister had impeccable timing, always calling right when I needed her most, even when she didn't know why. "Hey," I answered, my voice surprisingly steady. "Don't hey me. You've been dodging my calls for 3 days. What's going on?" I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Derek's been having an affair. The woman is 6 months pregnant with his son. I found out 2 days ago. I confronted him today with her present. He just left. Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm booking a flight. I'll be there tonight." "Helen, you don't have to do that. You were already planning to come next week for the birth." "Lauren Elizabeth, my pregnant sister just kicked out her cheating husband who got another woman pregnant at the same time. I'm coming tonight. Text me your door code in case you're asleep when I arrive." She hung up before I could argue. That was Helen. Decisive, protective, always ready to drop everything for family. I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time since finding the phone. Not tears of sadness, exactly, but relief. I wasn't going to have to do this completely alone. The doorbell rang an hour later. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my first paranoid thought was that Derek had come back to argue or explain or try to fix what couldn't be fixed. But through the peephole, I saw someone I didn't recognize. A teenage girl with dark blonde hair pulled into a high ponytail, wearing a Roosevelt High School sweatshirt and carrying a backpack. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" The girl studied me with an intensity that was unsettling for someone who couldn't be older than 14 or 15. "Are you Lauren Harris?" "Yes. Who are you?" "Chloe, Derek's daughter from his first marriage." I felt like I'd been punched.
Derek had a daughter, a teenage daughter he'd never mentioned, never introduced me to, never acknowledged in 7 years of marriage. I gripped the doorframe for support. I'm sorry, what? Chloe shifted her backpack. Can I come in? This isn't really a conversation for the doorstep. I stepped aside, still processing. Derek had been married before. He had a child. How had I not known this? How had it never come up in 7 years of marriage? Chloe walked into my living room with the confidence of someone twice her age, taking in the space with those same assessing eyes. She looked nothing like Derek, which made sense if she took after her mother. But something about her mannerisms, the way she held herself, reminded me of him. I know this is a lot. Derek probably never told you about me. He's good at pretending parts of his life don't exist when they're inconvenient. I sat down across from her, my mind reeling. How did you find me? I've always known where you lived. Derek sends child support checks every month. My mom keeps them in a file. I saw your address years ago. Why are you here? Chloe pulled out her phone and started scrolling. Because I saw something online today that made me realize Derek was up to his old tricks, and I thought you should know that you're not the first person he's done this to. She turned her phone toward me. On the screen was a Facebook post from someone named Vanessa Clark. It was a photo of an ultrasound image with a long caption about being strong through difficult times and trusting that everything happens for a reason. The post was public, shared widely, and the comments were full of support from friends who had no idea what was really happening. I follow her, Chloe explained. I've been monitoring Derek's second life for a while now. When I saw this post today talking about unexpected challenges, I figured the truth finally came out. You knew about Vanessa? I've known about you, about Vanessa, about the whole setup for months. Derek's not as careful as he thinks he is. He uses the same passwords for everything, leaves his laptop open when he visits my mom, doesn't clear his browser history. I stared at this child, this teenager I'd never met, who apparently knew more about my husband's secret life than I did. How long has he been visiting your mom? He doesn't visit her. She died 3 years ago, cancer. Derek comes by once a month to drop off money and check that I'm still alive. He stays maybe 10 minutes, usually less. The casual way she said it broke my heart. I'm so sorry. About your mom and about Derek being such an absent father. Chloe shrugged, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. I got used to it. He left when I was 2, only came around when the court forced him to. After Mom died, I went to live with her aunt, my Aunt Patricia. Derek was relieved he didn't have to take custody. That's horrible. That's Derek. She put her phone away. Look, I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because I'm tired of watching him do to other people what he did to my mom. She spent years trying to get him to be present, to care about his daughter, to be an actual father. He made promises he never kept, showed up when it was convenient, disappeared when it wasn't. Your mom knew about the cheating? Not at first, but yeah, eventually she figured it out. There was someone before you, someone named Angela who overlapped with my mom for about a year. When Mom found out, she filed for divorce. Derek fought it hard, not because he wanted to save the marriage, but because he didn't want to split assets. Eventually, she got tired of fighting and settled for less than she deserved, just to be free of him. I felt sick. Angela, another woman Derek that kept secret, another relationship he'd maintained while pretending to be committed elsewhere. How many were there? How many women had he lied to over the years? Does Angela know about me?
I asked. I doubt it. She moved to California right after the divorce. Lost touch with everyone. Chloe leaned forward, her expression serious beyond her years. Here's what I came to tell you. Derek has a pattern. He finds women who are trusting, who want to believe the best in people. He tells them whatever they want to hear, makes them feel special and chosen, and then he starts building a backup plan because Derek never commits fully to anything or anyone. He always keeps an exit strategy. You're 14 years old. How do you know all this? 15, and I know because I've been watching him my whole life, trying to figure out why my own father doesn't love me enough to stick around. You learn a lot about someone when you study them from a distance. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Helen, who must have caught an earlier flight than she'd planned. She took one look at me sitting with a teenager she didn't know and immediately went into protective mode. "Who are you?" she demanded of Chloe. "Derek's daughter from his first marriage."
Helen's eyes went wide. She looked at me, back at Chloe, then at me again. He has a daughter? Apparently, there's a lot I didn't know about my husband, I said tiredly. Helen, this is Chloe. Chloe, this is my sister Helen. She's a lawyer from Denver. Chloe perked up at that. A lawyer? That's perfect, because I have a proposition. We spent the next 2 hours in my living room, Helen taking notes while Chloe laid out everything she knew about Derek's history. The pattern of infidelity, the manipulation, the way he financially controlled his relationships. She had documentation, too. Screenshots from his laptop, financial records she'd photographed when visiting the house where Derek lived alone, evidence of accounts and assets he'd hidden from view. How did you get all this? Helen asked, her lawyer brain clearly both impressed and concerned about the legality. He's my father. When I visit once a month, he usually leaves me alone in the living room while he makes phone calls or works in his office. His laptop is always open on the coffee table. I just look at what's already visible. That's still potentially inadmissible in court, Helen warned. I'm not trying to take him to court. I'm trying to give Lauren the tools she needs to protect herself and her daughter, and maybe make Derek finally face some consequences for treating people like they're disposable. I looked at this fierce, damaged girl who'd been abandoned by her father and had spent years documenting his failures. Why do you care what happens to me? You don't even know me. Chloe met my eyes directly. Because you're carrying my sister, and I don't want her growing up thinking her father's behavior is normal or acceptable. Someone needs to show Derek that actions have consequences, and if none of the adults in his life are going to do it, then I guess it falls to me. Helen set down her notepad. You're remarkably mature for 15. You get mature fast when you have to raise yourself because both parents checked out. My mom was sick for 2 years before she died. I learned how to forge her signature on school forms, how to grocery shop on a budget, how to lie to social workers about having adequate supervision. You do what you have to do. Something in Chloe's story resonated with me. She'd been forced to become self-sufficient because the adults in her life had failed her. Now she was trying to prevent the same thing from happening to her sister, to my daughter. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Chloe pulled out a folder from her backpack, organized with tabs and labels. Derek's company, Cascade Pharmaceuticals, has strict policies on ethical conduct. It's in his employment contract, which I photographed last month. Any behavior that reflects poorly on the company or compromises client trust is grounds for termination. She flipped to another section. He's been using company resources for personal matters, booking hotels on the corporate card for his meetings with Vanessa, claiming them as client entertainment, using company time for personal appointments. That's fraud. Helen took the folder, scanning through the documents with increasing interest. This is solid evidence. Where did you learn to organize information like this? YouTube mostly, and I read a lot. When you spend most of your time alone, you find ways to educate yourself. If we take this to his employer, Derek will lose his job. That affects child support for Chloe and potentially support for my daughter. He has savings, Chloe countered, accounts in his name only that you probably don't know about. I have the statements. He's been hiding money for years, probably planning for exactly this kind of situation. Helen looked at me. She's right. If he's been hiding assets, we need to document everything before he has time to move money around. A divorce attorney will want all of this. I haven't even thought about divorce yet. He just left 3 hours ago. Lauren, you need to think about it now, before Derek recovers from the shock and starts protecting himself financially. Right now, he's rattled. That's when people make mistakes, forget to cover their tracks. Chloe nodded in agreement. Tomorrow, Derek is going to wake up and realize he needs to start doing damage control. He'll move money, delete files, prepare his defense. Whatever you're going to do, you need to do it now, while he's still panicking. I looked between Helen and Chloe, these two fierce women who barely knew me, but were ready to go to war on my behalf. My head was spinning with information, with revelations that kept coming faster than I could process them. I need to think, I said. This is all too much, too fast. I understand, Chloe said, standing up. But while you're thinking, Derek is planning.
Just remember that." She scribbled something on a piece of paper and handed it to me. "That's my number. Text me when you're ready to move forward. I have more information that might be useful depending on what you decide to do." After Chloe left, Helen and I sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "That is one impressive kid. Damaged, clearly, but impressive. She's been documenting her father's failures like it's a school project. Can you blame her? Derek abandoned her, let her mother die while barely visiting, dumped her with a relative, and walked away. Now she sees him about to do the same thing to another child. Of course she wants to stop him." I placed my hand on my belly, feeling our daughter's movements. What if Chloe's right? What if Derek just keeps doing this relationship after relationship, child after child, never facing consequences? Then you stop him. You and Vanessa and Chloe. You make sure he can't hurt anyone else the way he's hurt all of you. That feels like revenge. It's not revenge, it's accountability. There's a difference. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Are you okay? I've been thinking about you all evening." I texted back, "Derek has a 15-year-old daughter he never told me about. She just showed up with evidence of fraud and hidden assets." The response came immediately. "Are you kidding me? How many more secrets does this man have?" Good question. How many more lives had Derek lived that I knew nothing about? How many more people had he betrayed and abandoned? Helen ordered pizza and we ate in front of the television, not really watching whatever was on the screen. My mind was too busy processing everything, trying to figure out what to do next. "I want to hurt him," I admitted quietly. "I want Derek to feel what I'm feeling right now. The betrayal, the humiliation, the fear about the future. That's normal. You're allowed to want that. But is it right? Is it healthy? Should I be focused on moving forward instead of looking back?" Helen turned to face me fully. "Lauren, you're 8 months pregnant. Your blood pressure is dangerous. Your doctor wants to induce early. You're about to become a single mother to a newborn while dealing with a divorce from a man who's lied to you about fundamental aspects of his life. You're allowed to want justice. You're allowed to want him to face consequences. What about Chloe's information? Using it feels like stooping to Derek's level. Derek committed fraud with company resources. He hid assets in what I assume was preparation for divorce. He maintained multiple relationships through systematic deception. You wouldn't be stooping to his level by exposing the truth. You'd be making sure he can't hurt anyone else. I thought about Vanessa, alone in her townhouse, 6 months pregnant with a son whose father had lied to her about everything. I thought about Chloe, 15 years old and so damaged by Derek's abandonment that she'd spent years documenting his failures. I thought about my daughter, who would be born in less than 2 weeks, who deserved better than a father who viewed children as accessories to his various lives. "Okay," I said finally, "tomorrow I want to meet with a divorce attorney, and I want to look at everything Chloe documented. If Derek has been committing fraud, his employer should know." Helen nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking clearly." That night, I lay in bed alone for the first time in 7 years. The house felt empty without Derek's presence, but also peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in months. No more wondering where he was, who he was with, what lies he was telling. The truth was painful, but at least it was real. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "This is Chloe. Just wanted to say I think you're brave. My mom never had the courage to really fight back. She just got tired and gave up. Don't give up." I texted back, "Thank you for coming today. And I'm sorry about your mom." "Me too, but maybe we can make sure your daughter has a better outcome than I did." Another text came through, this time from Vanessa. "I've been going through everything Derek told me, trying to figure out what was true and what was lies. I don't think anything was true. Every single thing he said, every promise he made, all of it was just whatever he needed to say to keep me invested." "Same here," I replied. "I keep replying conversations, looking for signs I missed. They were there, I just didn't want to see them." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Fight back. Make sure he faces consequences. Protect my daughter. What about you?" "The same. I already contacted my HR department about his use of company resources. They're investigating. And I found a family law attorney who specializes in paternity cases.
I felt a surge of solidarity with this woman I barely knew. We were both victims of Derek's lies, but we didn't have to be passive victims. We could choose how this story ended. Helen appeared in my doorway holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea. Can't sleep? Too much to process. She handed me a mug and sat on the edge of my bed. Remember when Dad left Mom? You were only 8, but you were so angry. You told me you wished he'd just disappear forever, that we'd be better off without him. I remember. Mom told me I shouldn't say things like that. But you were right. We were better off without him. Once he was gone, once we stopped waiting for him to change or come back or be the father we deserved, we could actually move forward. This is different. I'm having Derek's baby, which means you'll always have some connection to him. But that doesn't mean you have to let him keep controlling your life. You get to decide what kind of relationship he has with his daughter, what kind of access he gets, what role he plays. I sipped the tea, feeling its warmth spread through me. Chloe said Derek always keeps an exit strategy. I wonder what his plan was this time. How did he think this was going to end? Probably the same way it always ends for him. He gets caught, makes a bunch of promises he doesn't keep, and eventually everyone gets tired of fighting and lets him walk away with minimal consequences. Not this time. Helen smiled. No, not this time. We sat together in comfortable silence until I finally felt tired enough to sleep. Helen took the empty mugs and turned off the light, but paused at the door. Lauren, I'm proud of you. I know this is awful, but you're handling it with more strength than you probably realize. After she left, I placed my hand on my belly one more time. Our daughter was quiet now, probably sleeping, unaware of the chaos her father had created. Your big sister is looking out for you, and so am I. We're going to be okay. All of us. We're going to be better than okay. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Derek. Lauren, I know you're angry, but please don't do anything rash. We can work through this if you give me a chance. I love you. I stared at the message for a long time. The old Lauren, the one that existed 3 days ago, might have wavered, might have wondered if he meant it, if there was a chance to salvage something from this wreckage. But that Lauren was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who'd looked at the worst truth and decided to face it head on. I didn't respond to Derek's message. Instead, I opened a new text to Chloe. Tomorrow morning, let's go through everything you have. It's time to make sure Derek finally faces real consequences. Her response came immediately, even though it was nearly midnight. About time. I'll bring coffee. I fell asleep finally, my daughter moving gently inside me, and dreamed of a future where we were both safe, both loved, both free from the man who tried to make us just another secret to manage. Chloe arrived at 8 the next morning carrying a tray of coffee from a local shop and a determined expression that reminded me she was Derek's daughter in ways that had nothing to do with genetics. She had his focus, his ability to compartmentalize and execute plans. The difference was she was using those traits for something other than deception. Helen was already dressed and working on her laptop at the kitchen table, reviewing Oregon divorce law and making notes. She looked up when Chloe walked in. You're punctual. I like that. Time matters, she said simply, distributing coffee. Decaf for you, she said to me. I checked what pregnant women can have. The small gesture of care from this girl I barely knew hit harder than expected. I accepted the cup gratefully and gestured for her to sit. Chloe pulled out her phone and a tablet, both loaded with organized files. I've been documenting Derek's activities for about 2 years, since I got old enough to really understand what I was seeing. I have financial records, email screenshots, text message threads, and calendar data that shows his patterns. Helen looked impressed. That's thorough. Almost too thorough. How did you access all of this? Like I said yesterday, Derek's terrible with security. He uses the same password for everything, leaves devices unlocked, doesn't log out of accounts. Plus, I'm his daughter. When I visit, he doesn't think I'm a threat. He sees me as an obligation he has to check off his list once a month, not as someone who might be paying attention. She pulled up a spreadsheet on her tablet. This tracks his expenses over the past 18 months. Notice the pattern? Every 2 weeks there's a charge at a hotel in Seattle or Lake Oswego. Always midweek, always billed to his corporate card with a notation about client meetings. But there were no client meetings. I understood. Exactly. I cross-referenced his corporate calendar, which he also leaves accessible on his laptop. On dates when he claimed to be meeting clients, his actual work calendar shows nothing scheduled. He was using company resources to maintain his relationship with Vanessa. Helen made notes rapidly. That's fraud.
Clear misuse of corporate funds. His employer would definitely want to know about this. There's more, Chloe continued. Derek has 3 bank accounts, one joint checking with Lauren, one personal account he claims is for work expenses, and one savings account neither of you probably knew about. The hidden savings account has over $200,000 in it. I felt my stomach drop. $200,000? Where did that money come from? His annual bonuses mostly, plus some inheritances from his parents that he never disclosed.
He's been moving money into this account for at least 5 years, probably longer. I only have access to statements going back that far. That's definitely something a divorce attorney needs to know about, Helen said. Hidden assets during marriage can really impact settlement negotiations. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Can we please talk? I'm staying at a hotel downtown. I want to explain everything properly. I showed the message to Helen and Chloe. Chloe rolled her eyes. He's going to try to manipulate you. He'll apologize, make promises, tell you what you want to hear. It's what he always does. How do you know? I asked. Because I've watched him do it to my mom, to other women, to employers when he's messed up at work. Derek's really good at performing contrition. He just never actually changes his behavior. Helen looked at me seriously. Do you want to talk to him? I don't know. Part of me wants answers. The other part knows that nothing he says will actually help. If you do talk to him, record it, Chloe suggested. Oregon's a one-party consent state. You can legally record conversations you're part of without telling the other person. If he admits to anything useful, you'll have documentation. That feels sneaky. It is sneaky, but Derek's been sneaky for years. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Vanessa. Derek's been calling me all morning, apologizing, saying he wants to make things right. Has he contacted you? I replied. Yes, he wants to talk. Not sure if I should. If you do, can I listen? Not to intrude, but I want to hear what he tells you versus what he tells me. I bet the stories won't match. An idea formed. I looked at Helen and Chloe. What if we all confronted him together? Me, Vanessa, and Chloe. Make him face everyone he's hurt at the same time. Chloe's eyes lit up. He'd hate that. Derek's whole strategy relies on keeping people separated, telling each person what they want to hear. If we're all in the same room, he can't play those games. It might be good for closure, Helen added. A final confrontation where everyone can say what they need to say, then you all move forward separately. I texted Derek back. Fine, we can talk, but not alone. My sister will be there, and Vanessa, and Chloe. The response came quickly. Chloe? Why would my daughter need to be involved in this? Because you made it her business when you abandoned her and then repeated the same pattern with 2 more children. 1 p.m. at my house. Be there or don't, but those are my terms. There was a long pause before he replied. Okay, I'll be there. The hours until 1 o'clock passed in a blur of preparation. Helen helped me draft a list of questions I wanted answers to, points I wanted to make. Chloe compiled her documentation into a presentation on her tablet, ready to show Derek exactly what she knew. Vanessa arrived around noon, nervous but resolute. I barely slept. I kept thinking about everything he told me, trying to figure out what parts were real. Probably none of it, Chloe said matter-of-factly. Derek's not good at truth. He's good at creating versions of himself that people want to believe in. We were all sitting in my living room when Derek arrived. He looked terrible, like he'd barely slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his eyes red and tired. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy before remembering why we were all here. Derek stopped in the doorway when he saw everyone assembled. Me on the couch, Vanessa beside me, Helen in the armchair, Chloe standing by the window like a prosecutor preparing her case. This feels like an ambush, he said. This is accountability, Helen corrected. Sit down, Derek. You wanted to talk, so talk. He sank into the remaining chair, looking between all of us like he was trying to calculate his best approach. I could see his brain working, trying to figure out what each person knew, what he could still salvage. I know I messed up, he started. I know I hurt all of you, and I'm genuinely sorry for that.
I never intended for things to get this complicated. Complicated, Vanessa repeated. That's what you call getting two women pregnant at the same time and lying to both of us for months? I call it being a coward. I should have been honest with both of you from the start, but I was scared. Scared of losing Lauren, scared of abandoning Vanessa, scared of making a choice that would hurt people I care about. Chloe snorted from her position by the window. You were scared of consequences. There's a difference. Derek turned to his daughter, and I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe. Or shame. Chloe, I know I haven't been the father you deserved. You haven't been a father at all. You've been a monthly check and an obligation you can't quite shake. That's not fair. Your mother and I had a difficult relationship. Your mother had cancer for 2 years. You visited maybe 6 times total. Don't talk to me about difficult relationships when you couldn't even show up for your dying ex-wife. The room fell silent. Derek looked stricken, and I realized this might be the first time someone had directly confronted him about abandoning his daughter during her mother's illness. I didn't know how to handle it. Seeing her like that, watching her deteriorate. So you just stopped coming. You made a 15-year-old deal with her mother's death alone? You know what I learned from that? I learned that when things get hard, you disappear. And now you're doing the same thing to Lauren and Vanessa and 2 more kids who are going to grow up wondering why their father doesn't love them enough to stick around. I do love them. I love all of you. No, you don't, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. You love the idea of us. You love having a wife to come home to, a mistress who makes you feel young and exciting, a daughter you can claim exists to seem like a family man. But you don't actually love any of us as real people with needs and feelings. We're just props in whatever story you're telling yourself. Derek's face crumpled. That's not true, Lauren. You have to believe me. I love you. I want to save our marriage. Even if I believed that, which I don't, it's too late. You destroyed any foundation we had. Vanessa spoke up. Did you ever plan to tell me about Lauren, or were you just going to keep juggling both families indefinitely? I was going to tell you. I just needed the right time. When would that have been? After both babies were born? After your son and daughter were old enough to wonder why daddy had 2 different homes? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. Chloe pulled up her tablet. Let me make this easier for everyone. Derek, I have documentation of 18 months of fraudulent expense reports. Hotels, restaurants, travel expenses, all billed to Cascade Pharmaceuticals for fake client meetings. I have bank statements showing a hidden savings account with over $200,000 that you never disclosed to Lauren. I have emails and text messages that prove you were maintaining relationships with multiple women while married. Derek's face went white. How did you get all of that? You're careless. You leave your laptop open when I visit. You use the same password for everything. You never log out of accounts. It wasn't hard. That's an invasion of privacy. So is lying to your wife about having a whole other family, Chloe shot back. I think we can call it even. Helen leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen, Derek. Lauren is filing for divorce. Vanessa is pursuing a paternity case to establish formal child support. And unless you want Cascade Pharmaceuticals to see all of Chloe's documentation about your expense fraud, you're going to cooperate fully with both proceedings. You're blackmailing me. We're giving you a choice. Cooperate and maintain your job, or fight us and lose everything. Derek looked between all of us, and I watched him realize he'd lost. There was no manipulating his way out of this, no story he could tell that would make us trust him anymore. What do you want from me? He asked finally. Full financial disclosure in the divorce, Helen said. No hiding assets, no playing games with the settlement. You'll agree to joint custody of Claire with Lauren as primary parent, plus appropriate child support. Establish paternity and child support for my son, Vanessa added, and you stay away from me unless it's directly related to our child. And me? Chloe's voice was hard. I want you to set up a college fund, the one you should have been contributing to for the past 15 years. $50,000. That's less than you spent on hotels and secret dates in the past year alone.
Derek absorbed this in silence. Finally, he nodded.
Okay, I'll do all of it. One more thing, I said. I want you to admit that you manipulated all of us. Not just apologize vaguely, but actually acknowledge what you did and why it was wrong. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine emotion in his face. Not calculation or performance, but real remorse. I manipulated you, he said slowly. I told you whatever you wanted to hear so you'd stay with me. I created a version of myself that was loving and devoted, but it was just a performance. I did the same thing to Vanessa, to my first wife, probably to every woman I've ever been with. I kept you all separate because if you ever compared notes, you'd see that I was telling different stories to different people. I treated you like possessions I could manage instead of people who deserved honesty and respect. Why? Vanessa asked. Why go through all that effort? Why not just be honest and choose one relationship? Derek was quiet for a long moment. Because I'm afraid of missing out, afraid of making the wrong choice, of committing to something and then realizing I could have had something better. So I tried to have everything at once, and I convinced myself it was sustainable. It was selfish, Chloe said flatly. It was incredibly selfish, and it hurt people I claimed to care about. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am genuinely sorry. The apology hung in the air. It didn't change what had happened, didn't undo the pain or the lies, but it was something. An acknowledgement, at least, that Derek understood the magnitude of what he'd done. You need to leave now, I said. Helen will send you the divorce paperwork, Vanessa's attorney will contact you about the paternity case, and you'll hear from Chloe's aunt about setting up the college fund. Derek stood slowly, looking at each of us one more time. When his eyes landed on my belly, on his daughter growing inside me, something in his expression broke. Will I get to meet her? After she's born? Eventually, supervised visits at first. We'll figure out a custody arrangement through the lawyers. I don't want her to grow up hating me. Then be a better father to her than you were to Chloe. Show up, be present, tell the truth. It's not complicated, Derek. You just have to actually do it. He nodded and left without another word. We listened to his car pull away, and then the four of us sat in silence for a moment. That was intense, Vanessa said finally. That was necessary, Helen corrected. He needed to hear all of that from all of you at once. Chloe was staring out the window, her arms crossed. Do you think he'll actually change? Probably not, I said honestly, but at least he knows we're not going to let him keep getting away with it. Over the next week, things moved quickly. Helen connected me with a divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset cases. Vanessa filed her paternity paperwork. Chloe's aunt sent Derek a formal letter demanding the college fund contribution. And I focused on preparing for Claire's arrival, which was coming whether or not I had my life figured out. Dr. Patel scheduled my induction for 5 days later when my blood pressure still hadn't stabilized. Helen would be with me in the delivery room, and Vanessa offered to visit afterward, which felt strange, but also somehow right. We'd been through something together, formed a bond in the wreckage of Derek's lies. The night before my induction, Chloe came by to drop off a gift. It was a baby blanket, hand-knitted in soft yellow yarn. She explained, "My mom made this for me when I was born. I want Claire to have it. So she has something that connects her to her sister she doesn't know yet." I took the blanket, emotion welling up. "Chloe, this is too much. Are you sure?" She explained. "Mom would have liked knowing it went to another little girl who needed it. Will you come meet her after she's born?" Chloe's face softened. "I'd like that, if you're comfortable with it." "Of course I am. You're her sister, your family." Claire Elizabeth Harris was born at 6:32 in the morning on October 15th. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the entire maternity ward. Helen cut the umbilical cord, while I cried tears that were equal parts exhaustion, relief, and overwhelming love. They placed my daughter on my chest, and she looked up at me with unfocused eyes that would eventually turn the same green as mine. In that moment, everything that had happened over the past week faded into background noise.
The betrayal, the confrontations, the legal proceedings, none of it mattered as much as this tiny person who was depending on me to figure it out. Hello, sweet girl. I'm your mom, and I promise you, I'm going to do better than your dad did. You're going to grow up knowing you're loved, knowing you're wanted, knowing that the people in your life show up for you. Helen took photos while I held Claire, documenting these first moments. Later, she'd tell me I looked exhausted but radiant, that she'd never seen me so present and focused. Vanessa came to visit that afternoon, bringing flowers and a card. She held Claire carefully, this baby who was born just weeks before her own son would be. "She's beautiful," Vanessa said softly. "She has your nose." And Derek's chin, unfortunately. "Maybe that's okay. Maybe she can take the good parts and leave the rest." Chloe arrived in the evening, still in her school uniform, carrying a teddy bear almost as big as the baby. She stood at the edge of the hospital bed, staring at Claire with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Do you want to hold her?" I asked. "I don't know how." "Neither did I until about 12 hours ago. Come here, I'll show you." I guided Chloe through holding Claire properly, supporting her head and neck. My daughter yawned and stretched in her sister's arms, perfectly content. "Hi, Claire," Chloe whispered. "I'm your big sister. We're going to have a complicated relationship because our dad is a mess, but I promise I'll always look out for you." Watching them together, my two daughters from Derek's different lives, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't the family I'd planned or imagined, but maybe it was the family we were meant to become. Over the next few months, a new normal emerged. Derek exercised his visitation rights, showing up for his scheduled time with Claire with a consistency that surprised everyone. He was trying, at least, even if his efforts felt performative at times. Chloe remained skeptical, but appreciated that he was doing better with Claire than he'd ever done with her. Vanessa gave birth to her son, Mason, in January. She sent me a photo from the hospital, this beautiful boy with Derek's dark eyes. I sent back congratulations and a gift card, maintaining the strange friendship we'd built from our shared trauma. The divorce was finalized in March. Derek didn't fight the settlement, probably because he knew about Chloe's documentation and didn't want it shared with his employer. So, I got the house, primary custody of Claire, and a child support arrangement that Helen negotiated to be more than fair. Cascade Pharmaceuticals never found out about Derek's expense fraud. We'd threatened it, but in the end, Helen convinced me that Derek losing his job would only hurt the children who depended on his income. So, we kept that information as leverage, a sword hanging over his head in case he ever tried to manipulate or deceive again. Chloe became a regular presence in our lives, visiting every weekend to spend time with Claire. She'd sit on my living room floor, helping Claire learn to roll over and then crawl, talking to her sister in that serious way she had about everything. "You're really good with her," I told Chloe one Saturday afternoon. "I always wanted a sibling, someone who understood what it was like growing up with Derek as a father. I just didn't expect to get one this way." She explained, "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're in our lives. Claire's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her too, and you. You didn't have to include me in any of this."
Your family. Of course I included you. One evening in late spring, when Claire was 7 months old and starting to babble real sounds that might become words, I found myself thinking about everything that had happened. The betrayal that had shattered my life, the confrontations that had forced Derek to face consequences, the unlikely family that had formed in the aftermath. I'd started freelancing again, taking on graphic design projects during Claire's naps. Helen had returned to Denver but called twice a week to check in. Vanessa and I texted occasionally, comparing notes on sleepless nights and developmental milestones. Chloe had started applying to colleges, already planning a future that would be funded by the account Derek had finally set up. None of it looked like the life I'd imagined a year ago, but it was real, and it was mine. And I'd built it from the pieces Derek had tried to destroy. Claire pulled herself up on the coffee table, wobbling on unsteady legs, and I reached out to study her. She grinned at me, that gummy smile that made everything worthwhile, and I thought about all the moments like this she'd have growing up. Birthday parties with both her sisters present,
Holidays split between imperfect parents who were trying their best, a childhood that wasn't what I'd planned, but might be exactly what she needed. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. Starting my college essay about family, can I interview you about what happened last year? I texted back, of course, come by tomorrow after school. Another message appeared, this time from Vanessa. Mason took his first steps today. Derek was here and actually seemed present for once. Maybe he's learning. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe we just forced him to care about consequences. Either way, I'll take it. The sun was setting outside my living room window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Claire was getting fussy, ready for her evening bottle and bedtime routine. I picked her up, held her close, and walked to the window where we could watch the colors change. Your dad tried to ruin us. He tried to break our family before it even really began. But we didn't let him. We built something better, something stronger, something real. Claire grabbed my hair and pulled, which I chose to interpret as agreement. Looking back, I could see how Derek's betrayal had felt like the end of everything. The discovery in the closet, the confrontation with Vanessa, the revelation about Chloe, all of it had seemed insurmountable at the time. But we'd survived it. More than survived, we'd transformed it into something meaningful. Derek would always be part of our story. He was Claire's father, Mason's father, Chloe's father. But he wasn't the author anymore. We'd taken that role from him, chosen to write our own ending, one where honesty and accountability mattered more than maintaining comfortable lies. I carried Claire upstairs for her bath, her small body warm and solid against my chest.
Tomorrow, Chloe would come over to work on her essay. Next week, Vanessa and I were meeting for coffee to discuss coordinating holiday schedules. In 2 months, Claire would have her first birthday, and we'd celebrate with this imperfect, unconventional family we'd built from wreckage. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a life I'd chosen, actively created, fought for, and that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.